talking about manual or transport wheelchairs. So these types of chairs are the most basic chairs that you can find. They're going to be used for someone that needs it for long distances, going to appointments, if you're going to be out in the community for a long period of time and they don't have good quality strength or endurance to be able to walk and keep up with their peers. It has very basic features to it. So you can see that you have a seatbelt. It should be worn at all times when someone is in the chair. You're going to have limited support, see, with the sway back here and limited cushion support here as well. Most transport chairs have removable armrests. This one does not, but typically they'll have a button or lever around this area to remove the armrest. Another important feature to consider is when someone is transferring in and out of a manual wheelchair. First, you want to make sure you have brakes on. So right here, brakes are on and off. And on. You also want to remove footrests so there's no risk of falling. So I just clip and I pull and move it over, and they can also just come on and off easily. You want to make sure that the chair has anti-tippers. So right here and here, and they just prevent the chair from tipping back. Another important feature is storage of the chair. All you need to do to store the chair is pull up the seat and it folds right up. This can be stored in a van if needed be. It can be stored in a closet, anything like that. So a tilt space wheelchair is generally prescribed for someone that requires dependent care. They're not able to weight shift and move in their chair and reposition themselves. And that's what makes the tilt space wheelchair unique. They also generally are not able to self-propel their wheelchair, and that's why you don't see the large wheels like you saw on the manual wheelchair or another type of chair called a K5 wheelchair. These chairs are going to have similar features and some very different features from the chairs we've seen previously. So you can see that they do have a seat belt, which is to be worn at all times. They're going to have the removable footrests that can be removed through these levers here, on and off. They have removable armrests. This one's a little bit more unique. It has a push lever and I can just push in and then push back in. They're going to have brakes that are right down here by the wheel. So you want to make sure that when you're putting those on, that you're using your hand to do it instead of your foot, because if you use your foot, it's going to constantly damage the brake and it will be unsafe for transfers. You can see that there's generally a lot more support than the transport chair we saw in the previous video. You can see that we have a headrest for head support, more lateral and custom backs depending on what that person needs, and there's going to be a specific cushion for the specific needs of that person. We'll talk a little bit more about types of cushions and things like that in a later video. And all of these things, these features of the chair, are designed by an ATP, somebody from a wheelchair company, and a physical therapist, an occupational therapist, and anyone on their support team. Another feature is the anti-tippers, which are going to serve the same purpose as the anti-tippers on the manual chair. They're going to prevent the chair from tipping. You also have the tilt feature, which is the most important part of this whole chair. So the tilt on this chair is right here, down here by the bottom. You can put your foot right on the button and then push down with the handles. Up and down. Now, this is a great feature for this chair, for someone that requires that dependent care and needs constant repositioning. Changing the position of the chair assists with preventing skin breakdown. It allows for pressure relief, movement for them, change in position, etc. It's ultimately a way that you can help to comply with the ARC's repositioning policy of repositioning every 2 hours. This is definitely going to be very important for maintaining skin integrity and preventing infection, preventing skin breakdown, things like that. Comes right back up. A power wheelchair is generally prescribed for someone that can navigate their environment independently, but does not have the ability, upper extremity strength, and endurance and coordination to be able to self-propel a manual wheelchair. So again, the power wheelchair is going to have similar features as the previous chairs that we saw, the manual wheelchair and the tilt in space. Generally, these features are going to be more custom because the power wheelchair is designed by a physical therapist, occupational therapist, and ATP, anyone who's generally involved in that person's life. So again, the features, you're going to generally have a seat belt, and that should be worn at all times for safety. You'll have removable armrests, which just generally can be removed through a lever that we saw previously. They're going to have more custom cushions. So this one has a Roho. We'll talk more about cushions in another video. They're going to have custom backs. Sometimes they're going to be molded to the person. It all depends on what they need. And they'll also have headrest support as well. Everything on a power wheelchair can be controlled through the joystick. So this is an on and off button here. You're going to have buttons for controlling speed, and generally like a menu type button that's going to have features such as tilt, recline, power, elevating legs, power seating, all that kind of stuff. It'll all depend on what the person needs. And then you just want to make sure that you're watching on this screen. There's going to be a bar up on the top that has red, yellow, and green light. So green would mean that the chair is fully charged and you're good to go. But if for some reason it's red, some chairs also beep when they're low battery. So it's something you need to watch. But generally, a good way to prevent low battery is charging the chair overnight when the person we support is sleeping. Generally, the rule of thumb is about 8 hours for a charge. So this is an example of a charger right here. It plugs real easily into the wall, and then there's a jack right here that you can plug it right into. Another thing that you need to consider with the power wheelchair is if for some reason you're going to go out, and any chance that you'll be outside, bring along a bag, like a Wegmans bag, or some sort of covering to put over the joystick. You just want to make sure that you're preventing any water going into the joystick because you don't want to damage the circuitry inside of it. If for some reason the chair or the joystick stops working while you're out and about, you can change the chair from power to manual. And that can be done by this lever down here. And you have to do it on both sides of the chair. And that'll allow you to push the person. But generally, this is not recommended as it's very difficult and heavy to push a power chair with a person inside, speaking from experience. Lastly, just when you're doing any kind of transportation with a power wheelchair, you want to make sure you're turning the chair off and on, because you don't want any kind of damage to the person or the driver. These switches are so sensitive, just a little bump or something could really make the chair go fast, hit the driver, or cause an accident in the back of the van.
Alright, so we talked about basic manual wheelchairs and tilt wheelchairs. There's one more category of wheelchairs I wanted to talk about with you, and that's the K5 manual wheelchair. This wheelchair is for a person who is able to use it pretty independently. It still has all the same basic features of the other chairs we discussed. It still has anti-tippers in the back, keeps it from tipping over backwards. You still have armrests. However, these might be height adjustable. They can go high, low, depending on what the person needs. They might be able to swing back or be removed all the way, and the person who uses this wheelchair might be able to do that on their own. You still have the hand rims to allow people to propel. Usually people who use this style of wheelchair are able to propel independently in most situations, so you want to encourage people to do that. They still have brakes here. You might find that there's like an extender on them to allow them to use them more independently. Again, we want to encourage them to use them independently. And we've got leg rests. They're usually like a swing away style, but you might see ones that just lift right off, and there's still foot plates on the back. Another thing that you're able to customize with this chair is the position of this wheel to allow them to propel more easily. It might be a little bit further forward. However, that makes the chair a little bit more tippy, so that's why the anti-tippers are even more important in that situation. So really every feature of this chair is customizable. So you'll see lots of different backs, cushions, armrests. So it's really important that you take the time to become familiar with the wheelchairs of people who you work with. You want to make sure you're able to help them with things, and you want to make sure you're able to identify if something's broken. If you find that anything is broken on a person's chair, just make sure you're letting PT or OT know right away so we can help you fix that.
Now that we've talked about different styles of wheelchairs, there are a few more important points that we have to make.
So the process for getting a wheelchair can be complicated. People qualify for new wheelchairs every 5 years through insurance, or if there's a change in their medical status. So it's really important that we keep their equipment in good working order because they need to have it for several years. So a physical therapist or an occupational therapist will perform an evaluation with the person who needs the wheelchair to determine what features of the wheelchair they need, and they work together with a representative from the wheelchair company to get them the wheelchair to their exact specifications. So sometimes it can take a long time because it requires a lot of documentation and a lot of talking to insurance. So it's really important that we are doing things like keeping the chair clean. We want to make sure you're wiping off any food on the chair and that you are treating the features of the wheelchair with care. When you're putting on brakes, leg rests, things like that. We want to make sure that we are using that correctly so things aren't getting broken. If something does break on a wheelchair though, please make sure you let your manager know and they'll get in contact with PT or OT so that we're able to take care of it.
It's also really important when someone's using a wheelchair that we encourage independence at all times.
So we want people to be able to be as independent as possible, but also assist them as needed. You want to treat people who use wheelchairs the same way that you would treat someone walking. So always make sure that you are talking to them and never moving their wheelchair without their permission.
And today I'm going to talk with you about tips to make sure that someone is positioned properly in their wheelchair following a transfer. I have a tilt and space chair with us today to show you. The first thing you're going to do before you transfer someone is check the seat cushion on their wheelchair and make sure that it's on properly. So when you finish transferring someone, what you're looking for is their hips to be all the way back. Now this is easy to do with a tilt function, but if you're with someone who's using a K5 manual chair, there won't be this tilt function. But generally the people that use those types of chairs are able to push themselves backwards using their arms and sometimes their legs. So if you cue them, they can generally help you out in that way.